particularly, but that lots of people have expertise. So shared leadership allowed us to bring in expertise from the region, led by what do these principals need. So we did a lot of analysis about, well, where are the kids that aren't over the line and where are the numbers? So at one point in time, we got halfway through the year and there was this huge chunk of kids that still sat on a PM0. And we know that that's a completely different set of strategies to move a child from a 0 than it is to move a child from 5 or 6 or 12 or whatever. So we were able to go back because we know time is precious, but as a regional team and the ladies that I had working with me in the expert models piece, and went, I want you to do a lot of research. And we had lots of conversations with Lynn about this particular piece of work, about what are the strategies that would move a child from a 0? And what do we need to focus on in this space? And most of those teachers obviously sat in the prep space, but not all. So knowing that that was a common issue across the schools that were involved, we were then able to offer a shared learning opportunity after school one day, because it was prep teachers. And we said, all right, we're going to do a workshop with strategies about how to move all of your children on 0. So we opened it up to every prep and year 1 teacher in the network and said, this is where we're going to be this afternoon. And we're going to go through these strategies and support you. And we were blown away. We had 150 teachers that afternoon in a room, sitting there collectively going, okay, this is strategies that I'm going to be able to use tomorrow in my classroom. So it was really practical, but it was really purposeful because it was linked to the community and around what we were trying to do. And we'd use the data analysis to go, this is even a tighter problem of practice, and we need to collectively move these kids. So that shared learning was really a critical piece to the effectiveness, I guess, and the success of the network, where we continually supported the schools in the data analysis about what was the pieces that we could support them within that shared learning. And the last thing is probably a bit of a passion of mine, and that's that distributive leadership piece, because in my job now, I know that principals turn over. The better the principal, the more regularly they turn over because they get promotions and they're moving along. So we have, I guess, a responsibility to the system to spread that leadership so that kids aren't disadvantaged by people moving on in their career and their promotions, because everyone deserves that. So how do we maintain some strong leadership for kids back at school, because they deserve the very best every day? So a really strong focus on the distributive leadership, not just in middle leadership roles, but we had teachers always come along to these collaborative networks. So we were actually building teacher leaders in the schools, and we were building probably unconsciously a teacher network where they would come and talk and could understand what was going on and see that what was happening in their school was the same as what was happening in the school down the road. So these, I guess, for me, are the critical pieces, or the pieces that when I stop and reflect on the success of the network in particular around the reading, that I think were the pieces that I would always continue. And you can see, we worked so closely with Lynn, but how they cover nearly all of the parameters in that piece of work to ensure that it's not just one piece. I think if you took something away in that honeycomb, then it wouldn't be as successful. It is about the collective and all of that work. So using that, we put together a really intentional structure. So it was a very formalised community. It was one in which I would call myself a facilitator, and then people co-led the work. But we did a full day per term and 2 schools in a day. So, because we're Brisbane Metropolitan, we could travel. We always worked out that we could travel up to about 40 minutes between schools to still make it work. So we set up a structure that was really clear, and each school, and so they knew what was coming. There was no guess about the structure. It was a really standard structure. And each school that we went to knew that they were the host school and that they were presenting the work. So at each school that we went to, the first and the last piece of this structure, we did one piece at the first school and the last piece at the second school. And then the school that we visited was in charge of the 3 blocks in the middle. So as I said before, at the start of every full day together, we shared the data that we were at. We shared where we were at in how many children were over the line. And we shared problems that we had, an open conversation about where we were at, what were our challenges between, in the last 10 weeks, what were our success stories, and we could look at, which schools had the greatest success and ask them, well, what did you do differently? Or what was your intervention look like this term? What was the teacher capability? So we spent about half an hour at the start of every day that we were together, sharing that accountability and sharing the team data. Identified data, so every school knew where they were and which school was moving, and that was how we started every full day together as a collaborative network. We then handed it over to the school because this was the piece about shared learning, and that we all share expertise in this space. So the host school then always did a presentation about what's been involved in their journey, what have been the critical strategies, who have been the key players, what have been their success factors, what have been their challenges. And they always had to, at their host school, when they do this presentation, provide us with a feedback template so they could design the feedback on what they wanted to hear about from the day. So they might say, I want to know how embedded this is, or how well students could talk about their learning goals when we go out to classrooms. I want to hear about whether you can see all the artifacts and whether they're being used in classrooms. But the school decided on what the feedback to the school was. So that was feedback. The group contributed in feedback to every school that we visited on the day. So it wasn't afterwards, it was time and reflection on the day about what you saw and what you could provide feedback on. So that presentation was always, oh, whoops, I don't know what happened then, wait up. Because it's not, you can't see it, I don't think, can you?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, all right, it just disappeared from me for a minute. So the host school sort of presentation was about 45 minutes each time with some questioning. And then what we did was the walks and talks. So we used that model explicitly around the 5 questions. We walked through reading classrooms. The school would choose what year level the focus was depending on what they wanted feedback on. But as a collective group, we would do walkthroughs and model that instructional leadership piece, and model what it should look like back at your own school. And we were, extraordinarily fortunate that Lynn was able to come with us at one stage and give us feedback on what our walks and talks looked like and how we could improve on those. But so we did walkthroughs at every school, so teachers knew that principals from across the region were coming to their school, and that we were doing walkthroughs, but it was actually for feedback to the school and not feedback to them, and feedback to one another for their learning. So we did that at every school, and then at each school we also did a case management process. So we modelled the case management process in the parameters. In the parameter number 6, we used that process. But in this section, a teacher from the school would be part of the case management process. So instead of the principal using a student and case managing, we put the teacher in the fishbowl and they talked about their student, and it was a wonderful opportunity for teachers to be really proud of the work that they were doing. And the teacher presented their student, the teacher presented what they had been doing, what their problem of practice was. And then it was an expectation from the group, principals and teachers, to provide some questioning using the case management process, some wonderings, and then some suggested next steps in that space. And then it was the school's responsibility to follow up with that teacher around what worked. And the teacher was able to say, well, if I'm going to implement that, this is the support that I need in the next few weeks to help that. And that school needed to wrap that service around the principal, and we would hear about that case management at the next term's visit. So that was a really important part for us about teachers from the school being part of that case management process, and principals needing to know the work enough that they could contribute about what might be a successful reading strategy for this particular child. So those 3 pieces, the host school journey, the walkthrough, and case management, was about the school that we were visiting and where they were at, and we were providing them with feedback and then with next steps learning, and it really was about them completely. At lunchtime, we then drove to the following school, and then we repeated the middle 3. So the next school that we got to did their journey. We did some more walkthroughs. We did another case management process. And then we always finish the afternoon with some new learning. So that expertise piece, that about shared learning, where we, both myself and my Principal Education Officer, Laurel Woolett, would look at the data and say, this is the next piece of learning that will support the bulk of the students that are at this level of reading. Or how do you move these children? So at some stage it was the kids just below the line where we knew we needed to stretch their understanding and stretch their comprehension skills. So we would do a really tight piece of learning on that piece that we knew would lift this group of students. So we would ask principals at the end of every day, what's the next piece that you need, either in your leadership or in your content knowledge around your data and moving forward. And then we would research that and bring the experts to the end of the day for the schools to share in that process. We always ensured that that was really practical so that people would walk away with strategies and a workshop style that they could present back to their school as distributed leaders in their school, or that they could share with teachers, or that the teachers there could use in their classroom the following day. So we had that really intentional structure. It never changed. It was exactly the same model each time because we didn't want it to be about the structure. We wanted it to be about the students. So the structure stayed the same, and we just went into greater depth at each school and provided schools with the feedback. And I think that's about us having that shared accountability, that visiting a school was about us supporting them in the process moving forward. Lynn asked me to share then the step into my new role and what does that mean. So we have moved from the School Improvement Unit to the Education Improvement Branch. And what does that mean, and what does my learnings mean, I guess? It is really interesting because part of the move to the Education Improvement Branch is that we now review regions and the work that they do around supporting schools and improving student learning outcomes. The other change in the name is because we now look before school. So we look at the kindy space in reviewing as well, and we look at the connections to early childhood services and the support that we're providing to ensure that smooth transition into prep. But really interestingly, we've now reviewed 3 regions and we're on to the 4th one in a couple of weeks. So that will be 4 out of the 7 regions in this state that we as an Education Improvement Branch have reviewed and provided feedback on what the next steps in system improvement are for the region around improving student learning. And this has been really interesting to me because so we use the Education System Improvement Tool, which is an ASA tool that we use in our system reviews. And these 4 dot points are about and expectations around high performing systems. So really interestingly, they all lead to that. How does the region or how does the system generate and sustain collaboration? How do they have collaboration based on improved student learning? How are the system ensuring that leaders have the right knowledge and resources to build professional learning communities that are about student learning? How do we set system-wide targets to create that motivation and intrinsic belief, I guess, and drive? So these are 4 things that sit really clearly in the tool that says this is what a system needs to have high performance in improving student outcomes. And it's always nice to look back on what you did, but I think that this is really clear around the piece around collaboration, around setting really clear targets, around being accountable, around driving and building motivation, and that clear moral purpose. So it's really nice to see it sitting in here. So that's a nice work for you, Lynn, to see that it sits in the tool that we're using around the state. So what have we learned around where this has been successful from all of the reviews that we've done? And I think these are the things that have come up in every region. So if I pull all of the region reports and go, okay, so what was successful across the regions? And I think it is that bit about are people coming together with a shared purpose? And it then works best. We hear from principals all the time, I hate being told who my friends should be. And we hear that in regional reviews, or I hate being put together with people. I like to own being part of a group. And we've heard that from principals really clearly across the state. The need for it to be data driven, and that's really critical, particularly in the education system improvement tool, around you're coming together, but for what purpose, and how are you going to share and celebrate the impact you've had in the time and investment you've put into your partnership. What does that look like? That shared ownership and facilitation. So not principals will talk to us across the state about not being done to, but being done with. So what does it look like, and how do they share the ownership and facilitation of the collaborative communities, and how do they drive that work? But they also talk about requiring and really appreciating the work of assistant regional directors across our state to facilitate the work, to actually set the structure, bring people together, have that common purpose, but then lean on the expertise in the group to share that ownership. So people really have talked highly about ARDs facilitating the work, or in that next dot point, seeding the idea, or the regions supporting groups to come together and say, I think this is going to work, this is something we want to try, and regions actually seeding, whether it be through human resources or financial resources, seeding some people to take a risk and have a go around improving outcomes and being able to share that success. And I think what we've heard from schools across the state so far is they appreciate the opportunity that the greater system has to provide some expertise. So if they set up these really strong collaborative communities, or PLCs, whatever they want to call them, and they're called different things across the state, but they appreciate that both the centre and the region is able to provide some really strong expertise to help them moving forward. So those are the key pieces that we have seen in the 4 regional reviews that we've done so far. And interestingly enough, what I've put on the side is some of the ideas or some of the shared problems of practice that people have come up with. Some of them are about student wellbeing in particularly in our Indigenous communities, what that looks like. That K-2 transition space has really kicked off across the state. High schools that are having that issue with transition and high suspension rates in year 7 and 8, and coming together as a collective, because otherwise they just exclude and then share their problems. So if they come together and share the problem, then what will it look like? And then lots of our schools across the state are coming together in really strong communities around moderation and moderating the Australian curriculum. So, they're the ideas that are coming up from our work. We will provide and develop an insights paper very soon about our system learnings. At the moment, we provide insights papers back to schools each term about our work and what we're seeing in schools. And this is this next level piece of work around systems. So I'm going to stop there and then open up for questions, and I can flick back and forward, see how good I am at Zoom, and take any feedback from, the field, or also happy for people to contact me privately afterwards.
So thank you.
Over to you, Lynn.
Thank you, Raquel. Oh, I can't thank you enough. I'm just so excited to have you retell that work with your network and how it's really morphed into your thinking in this position. So that was really gratifying for me to hear the specificity of your leadership. And you just kind of forgot to tell us about the data. Like, it was so amazing, that data. Can you just say a little bit about the data from getting the kids over the line by 9?
Yeah, absolutely. And I probably didn't go into it because it sits in Clarity, and we've put that work there. But we were able to really celebrate that schools in our cluster, which were below SES, had now become above state or equal to state, and they'd never seen that before. We actually ensured in this program in this community that no child left prep on 0, and that was one of our biggest celebrations, that we put everything behind this piece of work, even if it was in week 10 term 4, to ensure that no child left prep on a 0. So there were some really strong celebrations that I guess, created the belief to continue. And it created a belief in an area where I think they'd got used to it was okay to have some kids fail. So there was now that belief that all kids can pass. So some of the data around our Year 5 reading results from that cluster and the Year 3 reading results are in clarity on page 329. But I guess the piece that I was most proud of is the fact that we got through with no child on zero at the end of prep.
Yeah, that is just so phenomenal. And I can remember being in Metro for the first time and saying to the group assembled, how many kids are on zero? And I think there was a huge gasp in the room. And I think it's the fact you've raised the awareness and just some phrases that will stick with people. Over the line by 9, no zeros going into year 1. Those are the things that really, I think, demonstrate your moral purpose. So thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure some people have questions. So will you share your PowerPoint slides with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you just want me to email them to you, Lynn, and then you'll share them to the group?
If you email them, then our group has a private members section on my website.
Okay.
And we'll just put them up there for everyone to access. But I really appreciated the thoughtful dialogue, Raquel. So now over to everyone. If you have some questions for Raquel, such an opportunity to hear from her.
Now I'm going to go to the chat. I'm going to try and, oops.
I have a question on behalf of Tony, who apologises he couldn't be here today, but he's interested in understanding how new folks might join an existing network. So where a network is existing and people have been working together for some time and have some established relationships and some established ways of working, and then new people, new schools join that. What does that look like to transition that new school into an existing network?
I think for us, part of that was the importance of keeping the structure the same, so that was what people were used to. So if people were going to join, and we had that at some points in time, then I would go out with them one-on-one and talk about the contracted piece. So if you join, this is the expectation, this is who's in the room, that this is what the structure looks like, and get a commitment from that leadership team first. I'd often ask them to connect with one of the people in the team in the collaborative community around what that would look like. And if after that they're absolutely keen to join, then for me it made no difference because the structures looked exactly the same. They would have to join and share their data where they were at, so they understood that their data might not have been up with the other schools because we've been working on it for a while, but we would then just collectively share that data and they would join from the next meeting. But there wasn't a need, I guess, to have the prior knowledge because we were always building from that school's journey on that day, and the walkthroughs were present on that day. So I think that structure piece is really critical.
Kel, how long did this collaborative network work together?
This one probably worked together for 2 years. So they really enjoyed the relationships and building the work. So when we initially did put it together, it was about the calendar year we were in, about getting those children over the line before 9, about the prep, no zero in prep. But it was something that people really invested in and then wanted to continue. So we gave people opportunity at the end of the year for the start of the following year to change people in the group because we would use the new set of data. So it might be that the teacher representative was different, but the principal was the same. It might be that there was a different deputy so that they started to learn the work and that new teachers came on board. So we allowed them to change membership, I guess, at the end of every school year, but that we continued the process. And then I left Metro.
So all the schools got together once a term. Did you get to every school in that time?
Yes, so over the there was 8 schools in it, so we did 2 a term initially. So we got through all of those, which was great. And I think there probably is a cap on the numbers when you want to do walkthroughs, and when you want to do case management and actually visit each school, which was probably why I had a couple of different networks, because even the K-2 network, which was focused on the no zero leaving prep, it was still on reading, so people could still have a reading agenda and say, well, my data says I really should be in that one rather than the over the line before 9. So whilst they both had a reading focus, it allowed people to split and decide, because I think many more than 8 schools, when you want 3 or 4 people from a school, becomes more of a conference rather than a collaborative network.
And my other question is your measures. So you're using PM benchmarks?
Yeah, so we used PM benchmarks, and then we did triangulate it with NAPLAN around how did those, which was the 9-year-old piece, about how did those children then perform in NAPLAN reading. But for those 2 networks, we used PM benchmarks.
Okay, thank you.
Some schools used F&P and we translated so that we could have a standard data set, but yeah, most of them use PM.
With a lot of schools using synthetic phonics, the PM benchmark times don't work with the approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So we never mandated what you used, but we had a formula, finding some of the research about what they would equate to, so that we could look at, well, what does that mean? What does a 0 mean in F&P or whatever process you use?
And then over the line by 9 was your NAPLAN. No one under the line.
No one under the line in NAPLAN.
That's a simple one too.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the regions at the moment's got a great phrase that post out the regional reviews, and theirs is called Towards Zero. So it's no child below a C in English. So their mantra for every school is Towards Zero, which is nice for people to get behind, and we heard a lot about that at the review.
So Towards Zero, isn't that SER? Don't you use that, Rachel?
That's us,
No,
North Coast.
North Coast used Towards Zero.
We had one of our groups who shared last week, had that as their vision or their mission.
Yeah, that's right. I thought I heard that last week. Yeah.
Yeah, North Coast.
Okay, great, good. And there are many assessment tools, and for me, the common assessment format is running records. So even if it's F&P or if it's Fountas or if it's PM benchmarks, the running records run across those. Any other questions for Raquel? I think what I most appreciated, Raquel, was hearing again about the structure. And for me, I'm always reminded structure drives behavior. So you had a structure that everyone could count on. They knew the protocol, they knew the reason. And so it was never a surprise. The structure was in place and remained in place. And the focus just went more deeply each time you got together. Would that be right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Any other questions? I know Raquel needs to leave soon.
I've got another web conference with Southeast Region about their review. So
there you go. Oh, there you go. Well, a couple of people will be missing because they're on my call.
No, I've done that one. I've done them. This is like the 3rd time. So I'm picking up the stragglers.
All right. Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you. And I wonder if a few of you could just say one thing that you're going to take away from Raquel's conversation. Just maybe ask Carolyn. I'll just name a few people. What might be your takeaway, Carolyn?
Can you hear me, Lynn?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think what it did, Raquel, was consolidate some of the good things that we're doing. Sometimes you've got common sense and you go, yeah, that makes sense to bring people together with like interests but you jump on that adventure and off you go, you know. So what you consolidated for me was just some clarity in your slides. Yes, we're on the right track. I really like, my mind's still buzzing around your system improvement tool, not just school improvement tool, because we have the NSIT, the National School Improvement Tool in Victoria, but to see that you've developed it into a system system improvement tool makes my mind buzz around the possibilities there. So I really probably want to, I've already started Googling, looking at that.
Yeah, you won't find it online draft.
Right.
But you can contact me and I can talk about it, and you can contact ASA. So ASA have it in draft because it's, we're trialling it, and so is some other jurisdictions. Northern Territory have started working with it as well.
That's great.
Great. Terrific.
And Bronwyn, do you have anything that you could share with us as a takeaway?
There we go. Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Raquel. Really love hearing about your work prior to moving into the EIB, because there are strong parallels to the work that I'm doing in the region. So it's inspiring and I appreciate that. I'm really thinking about keeping the data alive, particularly in this period of time where we've had a little wobble in terms of A to E reporting through COVID. So I'm thinking about all of the different data sets that we could use to keep putting in front of schools and principals to maintain momentum. So that was a big one for me. And also thinking about that next little bit of really specific PD. What is the actual learning that people are looking for right now? So finding out ways to get that feedback, but also to deliver something really practical, as you were talking about. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And Gerard, maybe you get the last comment.
I think there were two things that stood out to me, and I'm the director of schools in our diocese, and we have 58 schools working with Lynn. It's the systemness of what we're doing. So we have 40 schools that have come on board this year, and the other 18 will come on board next year. And the power of having the depth of schools working together, and the fact that the system is modelling, co-constructing, co-learning with our schools. So the point that Raquel talked about, system-wide collaboration, is fundamental. The second thing that's been really powerful in our journey is one of the other points she made of sharing effective practice. So what we've been doing, we have basically a newsletter that goes out to every staff member in the diocese. There's 3,500 of them every Monday morning. We've been getting some of our champions in school talk about the specific aspects of their journey. And the ripple effect of that, the modelling, the importance, the consistent message that this is happening week in, week out. So system-wide collaboration and sharing effective practice, I certainly think are two powerful messages that Raquel had for me.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks so much. Thank you. I know, Raquel, it's time for you to go, but I just...
Yeah, they're hanging out my door going, are you going to be ready? I'm like, yeah, I'm all good. I've given them the thumbs up.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks again. Many thanks from all of us. We've really learned a lot. I just love your detail and specificity.
No worries. And when I send the presentation through, I'll put my contact details on it. So if anyone wants to connect about the ESIT or anything, happy to do that.
I'm sure they will. Thank you so much.
Fabulous, everyone. Thank you.
By the way, I recorded it, but I was a little slow on the recording. So
Oh, that's okay. I don't think I'll need to rewatch myself.
You might really enjoy that. Thanks, Raquel.
No worries. Perfect. See ya. I'm just taking a photo of the chat in case I got to follow anything up, because I don't know how to save that either.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. Do we know how to save it? Rachel?
There is a way, but I'm just way not good enough.
Rachel, do you know how?
It's the three dots just down beside the where it says everyone file. There's 3 dots. You can hit save chat there.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. I've saved the chat. I don't know where it's going to be, but I'll look for it. Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to go around the screen now, and just in the final time that we have together, I would really like you to have an opportunity to express what's happening in your jurisdiction. So why don't I call on Bernie and Jody to chat first. Bernie and Jody are from Victoria, regional Victoria. So maybe we'll start with you, Bernie, and then Jody might add to your comments.
Thanks, Lynn. Morning, everyone. Yes, we're continuing on with our work, Lynn, despite all of the challenges that exist around that. So we've become, and Lynn's become a great expert at WebEx as well, because that's the platform that we use. So challenges her every time. But yesterday she was cool and calm under some trying conditions. So we're continuing to work across our networks and continuing to undertake professional learning with them. Yesterday, and one of the things we've built into some of our catch-ups with Lynn is really hearing back and really encouraging the schools to develop their case stories, their case studies. And so yesterday, Lynn, you would have had the opportunity to hear back from lots of those schools. I have to say, despite the current situation, so we're all in remote learning at the moment. We're about to, in term 4, hopefully, fingers crossed, come back out of remote learning, back on site again, which will be fantastic. But despite the fact that we're all in remote learning, people's resilience and their, and I guess the way that they've continued to attend to the work and continued to, just contribute is just amazing. It's just amazing. And I think it's because we're really connecting them in with the key work, that like they can see this is their moral imperative, and it really connects and resonates with them deeply around that. So our 3 networks continue to work on. We've had some goes across all 3 networks at some remote kind of learning walks that we had undertaken earlier on. So, examples of using video and then having groups come together to talk about the different aspects of the learning walk. And Jody has facilitated some of those as well, including undertaking the 5 questions, with a student. So with students and recording that, and then bringing that back to the people, to the teachers and in the school. So we've been trying to do as much as we can in very innovative and different ways, Lynn, is what I'd say. And I'll hand over to Jody, because Jody works with one of those networks in particular, and a really strong, a network with a really strong culture around beliefs and understandings that she's developed with them. And I really, they're really one of the leaders across our region in terms of this work and in terms of adopting the work.
And Bernie, how many schools are you responsible for in those 3 networks?
68.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much. Jody, over to you for just a moment.
Surely. So within that, I've got 22 schools I'm accountable for within the 68. The message I would pass on is we are relearning. We're going back and revisiting the messages with Lynn. And so the sessions we're currently having, there is the opportunity while we're online to engage more of the staff. The teachers are more available with the timing and how it's rolling out. And we've had discussions since and continue to have that transfer of learning to practice, and hearing again the messages around the practice and systems and processes in place, the language and the learning they're talking about is getting much stronger. And I was conscious of making them accountable, and the case studies, them telling their stories, has actually, Lynn, blown us away. Because, you know, when you're leading something, you're trying to get change happening and you wonder if it's happening, and you're always perhaps looking for what's not happening. And it has been a great chance for them to share where they're at, where their next steps are, and the shift that's happening in their classrooms for their students.
Thanks, Jody. And I guess I was really blown away by the presentation of the secondary team. Oh my gosh, one of the secondary teams. So we have primary and secondary schools in these 3 large networks. And the one school talked the entire time about their recreation of the third teacher using Google Slides, and how they did all of their work. The teacher actually presented the Google slide, and she said, this is exactly what my classroom looks like. And so they were doing, and every time they pressed on something, you know, a document would come up, and she said, it's because when we go back to class, the class will look the very same. And so they were really focusing on the third teacher. So it was really heartwarming to see a secondary school classroom with lots of anchor charts and data wall, and it was really exciting. I mean, they were all exciting presentations, but I was really taken by the secondary school group. I mean, they're doing it all: data walls, walks and talks, case management meetings. They're doing it all. The 14 parameters are up.
Yeah, and the one actually, Lynn, with the virtual classrooms, I've been having conversations with them for the last 3 years, and suddenly in this virtual space, they've been able to actually transform the classrooms, that learning environment, with their virtual platforms, and much more so than the physical rooms in the school.
Yeah, and their message was that, you know, these Google classrooms are going to look like their real classrooms if and when we get back to that. But they also had virtual staff rooms too, with their data walls and the 14 parameters and the 5 questions. And wow, it really blew me away. They were all excellent presentations. And it's just so heartwarming to see secondary taking off. So thank you. So I just like to hear from Carolyn. Are you and Marwin there somewhere?
I'm here if you're happy with me responding.
With you. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a funny story this week, I have to tell you. We were in a meeting with the leadership team, and the principal was talking, and I noticed her data wall behind her. She was obviously on site. And I thought, this is a great opportunity to sort of do a virtual walk. So, you know, I said, look, I noticed the data wall behind you there in the room. I'm wondering if you could take us closer to the wall and talk us through some of your wonderings right now. So, you know, she sort of clumsily moved towards the wall, and she started to talk, and I said, look, can I just stop you for a moment? Could you just move a little to the left and a bit higher up, because I want to see the key? And she says at that point, it's really hard to do that with a desktop that's attached to the wall. I'd assumed she had a laptop and she was just taking it to the wall, but she was physically carrying the entire desktop with all the cords to the wall. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. In my enthusiasm to take your data wall, I went, oh my gosh, the things you assume. And that's my highlight of the week, how enthusiastic they can be. Anyway, what we've got, we had online meets with Lynn in August, and that was about 70 schools. Well, 30 of the schools had a webinar, because we've got those 3 cohort phases, and 40 schools engaged in online meets. So we had 3 to 4 schools in a meet, and we had 6 nutshell statements across the work that we were noticing from their leadership conversations. So it might have been assessment literacy and going deeper in the waterfall chart around feedback and descriptive feedback. It would have been, another one was data-led conversations and the data that you're gathering to have those conversations. So we had 6 statements, and the schools selected their focus. And then we put them with other schools into a 1-hour online meet. And so Lynn started with some input around that nutshell statement. And then the schools had about 10 minutes each to talk about where they were, what their next step was, and Lynn sort of teased that out with them. So whilst it, you know, that you were all in together, it was an engagement between Lynn and the school, and the consultant in there recorded the next steps and the key ideas that were shared with that. Each school had to present a template prior so that all other schools were familiar with them before they entered the space. So that's what happened in August. And then in our region, each school is assigned a support team. So you've got your principal consultant, you've got me as your school effectiveness, and then depending on your focus, you will have a literacy consultant or a maths consultant, and in Catholic Ed we have an RE consultant as well. So they've had 2 leadership team meetings. That's been the key to success. So going to professional learning is one thing. Following it up with a dedicated hour of dialogue around why and, you know, what's your one step. Some people can feel overwhelmed in this time. So to just say, what's one thread that you want to take forwards? And we've been calling that your +1. What's your +1 in this next step of the work? Because we do have some schools that are just, you know, there's a lot on. And we do get a lot of schools initially talking about the operational part. I've got to think about this. I've got to get the packs out, the teachers and whatever. We just try and get to that +1 learning next, which I think is what energises them for the work going forwards. And so that has been really good. And that's where we're at. Most of those schools have had 2 leadership team meetings. They're clear about just one next step. They're positive about moving forwards. So, you know, last year we had learning walks and talks through 3 school sites, but for different leaders. So literacy leaders was at one school, learning and teaching was at another, and principals was at another school. And we ran like Raquel learning walks and talks in the school and came back and did focused learning. And they were so motivating. We haven't had that this time. So what we've asked is some of our key leaders to do a walk through their school anyway, and just have like a 5-minute, there's 2 schools that have done 5-minute video virtual walks. And that's been really helpful for our new cohort that hasn't had all of that work before, just to see what it might look like, a little bit of what it might look like, you know, which helps.
I must say that I'm missing the learning walks and talks, that's for sure, because that's really for me where the rubber hits the road. So Kate, and I love our on-site learning or our learning virtually. But actually, when you're out in schools and you're talking about what you're seeing and why you're talking about this, why is it meaningful and what are the next steps? That's really so important. So I've been really thinking hard about what virtual learning walks and talks will look like. And I'm going to explore Pivot. Have we heard about Pivot? That was one of the schools, Rachel and Bromwyn, who talked about that, I think, in one of our, no, it was Jody, wasn't it, last night? Oh my gosh. Okay, thanks very much, Carolyn. And I know after this session, Carolyn and I are going to meet to talk about 2021. So how good is that? Thanks. Yeah. And so over to Bromwyn and Rachel, tell us a little bit about what's going on in SER in Queensland. So that's South East region in Queensland, and Carolyn was in Victoria.
Thanks, Lynn. I think we're all on a very similar journey at this point in time where we've had many schools commence the work, almost 2 years ago now, with a bit of a COVID hiccup in the middle. And so with our cohort 1 and 2, which is about 57 schools, they're certainly starting to move into that phase of collaboration and sustainability. So our focus has been on how we're supporting principal learning communities to come together to share their work, to think about next steps. So a little bit like what you just referred to, Carolyn, just around schools doing some preparation beforehand, creating a bit of a template, having some celebrations, but also thinking about that next piece. And we've just come off the back of a very long week for Lynn, meeting with our schools in those sessions, and it's been a powerful experience. I think the other part to that piece has been around how do we continue to share that learning, promote that systemness as we move forward. And last time we shared that we developed a journal, where we were able to launch our second edition of the journal just gone on Monday, where again further 6 schools were able to really showcase their work, talk through what that looks like for them, the piece that they've been focusing on, and celebrating the lift that that's been able to provide. So we're really keen for this group, cohort 1 and 2, to really focus into that collaboration and sustainability piece. We do have another 2 cohorts that that will begin with Lynn next year, but we are refocusing with them next term around bringing them together in collaborative groups, refocusing back in on book studies to think about the preconditions. What we learned from our first group was some of their aha moments. Oh, if we had have really shaped our thinking around what that means for our annual planning, we may have done something a little bit different. So using some of our cohort 1 and 2 principles to provide a little bit of that pre-thinking to help our cohort 3 and 4 prime for success.
Yeah.
Rachel, further thoughts there?
Yeah, Rachel, how many schools will that be for 4 cohorts, Rachel?
I think we're looking at approximately 100 once we introduce cohort 3 and 4.
Okay.
So that's exciting. And I think 2 of the exciting pieces that came out of last week was, one, how invested our schools were, and their relearning over the last term, 2 terms, this was the work that got them through their learning at home and their transition back. They knew the power of the work, but through staying committed to the work and seeing it in a new light and reassessing and reevaluating, they actually recommitted. And their energy and enthusiasm that they brought last week really highlighted that. The other thing is that when we did put the call out for the second journal, we did so not with the expectation necessarily that we would publish. We wanted to hear from the schools and to have 6 put their hand up. But as of last week, with our calls and our journal launch on Monday, our EOI went out yesterday, and we now have 6 already. We could have a big journal.
Good. Well, that's good. The bigger the better. So Rachel and Bronwyn, thank you so much. And your journal is really exemplary, I must say. It's a scholarly piece of work. So if people maybe could contact you to get a copy, would that be okay?
We are publishing a hard copy, so it won't be available digitally. And we might just have to tweak some of the permissions, but I'm sure Bronwyn and I can work that one out.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's on teacher leadership, and it's just excellent. And the 6 case studies are excellent as well. So great reading. Okay, I'm going to look at Suzanne and Jared and maybe Breed. I'm not sure she maybe had.
No, Breed had to go to another meeting. Yeah. Thanks, Lynn.
What you're doing?
Yeah, so I think we took the term in the system chapter of positive pressure because it's been how to keep up that through COVID, and I agree with what was just said. I think it's actually given our schools a way through COVID and a way through these challenging times. The fact that they engaged with you in March, most schools have bought copies of the book for everybody, and as they're doing more of the work, they're realising that they need it, and schools are finding it really helpful to have every teacher with that in their hands. So ACEL keep getting orders and orders and orders from us. But we've been doing, leading up to when our schools will catch up with you in October, just short half-hour catch-ups with groups of 4 schools, and the schools will be in a group to talk to you in October. and they've been so enthusiastic. They've been short catch-ups, but every time you hear, oh, can I catch up with you after the meeting about this, that, or the other thing? And I think it's that networking and learning from each other and appreciating the little successes and the uniqueness. You know, some schools have done more work in case management. Other schools have done more work in data walls. Some schools have done more work in learning walks and talks. It sort of has shaped differently, but they've all got to share. And even last night we got an email from one of our principals whose daughter's working in another school and didn't realise that they were further on with the data wall. And she said, can they do a video so that it can be shared with everybody? So I think it's that magic of the positive picture, the sharing that we've done, as Jared said, through the Director's Bulletin, through all any system PD definitely has a flavour that links to the work. We're limited in school visits, but in the ed officers and the assistant directors that are going on school visits are nearly all engaging in a learning walk and talk at the beginning of that visit. And I think the learning that's been done at the office. So we do 4 professional learning sessions a term, which have been really great with getting everybody on board. We've now got, I think, 6 data walls scattered throughout the office that people are playing with, because we've got the magnets idea that we took from Wollongong, and the first couple were guess how I arranged these schools. So it's created a lot of fun in playing with the data.
That's great.
Do you want to add anything?
Dan, Jared, do you have anything you want to add?
I think Suzanne hit it. What's happening and what I love these meetings about is that everyone is really doing the same thing. We just happen to be at different points, and it really re-energizes and reinforces. But because we have that systemness, we've got 40 schools and we'll have all 58 next year, we are embedding the language and practice in everything we do. So at our leadership team meeting last Friday that Suzanne was part of, we had an hour there where we were playing with a particular piece of data on a data wall. I think one of the powerful communications our principals give back to us at the system level is that you are doing exactly the same work as us. We're doing it, we're co-constructing.
Yeah.
But at the school's office, we have our Leading Learning collaborative meetings fortnightly. We have our case management meetings fortnightly. When that was put on the table in Term 4 last year, there were shrieks of horror that we were all way too busy to do this. And guess what's happening? We're all doing it because we can see that this is the priority. And you'll be pleased to know, Lynn, that last Friday, I put a data wall up in my office. So it is important.
Yeah.
And you know why I did it. You know exactly why I did it. It's important when people walk in, they think, oh, he's got a data wall too. And so when people come in, we can play around with where schools are at and where they should be and why aren't they growing as much and so on. So as Suzanne said, there's been 4 data walls appear over the last month in our corridors at the office. But I think that's an important message of modelling. Yeah. What is important to us? And this is our core work, and that's the key message.
And I just so appreciate, Jared, that you're always talking that language. You're developing the common language that everyone uses. You're always, you know, out in front, and you're learning alongside. You're a great model of that distributed leadership. It does really start by everyone articulating the same clear messages, our moral purpose, and you really do that. So thank you. I'm really glad to hear you have a data wall in your office. You need to send me a picture of it.
I will.
That's great. So I want to hear from Michelle and Leanne, who are joining us from Lismore. Michelle, anything you want to share with us about what you're doing?
Thanks, Lynn. I think Leanne's going to start, and then I will add some further system conversation at the end.
Okay. Leanne.
Michelle, hello everyone. I'll try and be short, sharp and shiny. We use that phrase so often, Lynn, when we get together for our meetings now. We love it. So we the next 2 days with Lynn, we have our first Zoom meets with groups of schools, 2 groups of schools who indicated through a template that they shared that they were ready to come together and talk about their work thus far with Lynn. So Lynn has those templates, and we're looking forward to those first 2 groups coming together tomorrow and the next day. And it's really the first time that the schools will have been hearing from each other. What's been going on in the meantime is our system teams, the teams within our systems across our clusters, have been working closely with each of the schools as they've been progressing their work. So with cohort 1, we have 13 schools, some of them, as I said, will Zoom within the next 2 days, and the remaining schools will Zoom with Lynn later on in October, and they will have the same structure. In the meantime, our learning services team has been meeting regularly to progress our learning, and making sure that we have alignment in our work and seeing what is inside our circle of practice. So thanks, Carolyn, the circle of practice that you shared and the way that you use that has been really helpful for us in moving forward, and even now our schools are using it because it's been influenced by our team. We have 16 schools who've indicated they'd like to be part of cohort 2. Michelle might share a little bit more about what's been shared with them and where they are going with that. But certainly schools are engaged in going back to the text of clarity, looping back when they need to. And some of them have found that they've had to test parameter 1 out, even in this short time that they've been doing the work. So over to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Leanne. Yeah, no, I've got it now. Thank you. All right, so we now have a wait list coming into cohort 3, and I haven't shared that with Lynn yet, but I'm just thinking, oh, there's another year where we need cohort 3, and that's because of the shared practice. So they're actually hearing what the other schools are doing, and they're going, yes, we actually need to do that work. So it was quite optional in our diocese, and but being optional, the sharing is now sharing, and they want to be in too. So that's a really good conversation that's happening. Our system benchmarks has been the challenge for us. So we have worked pretty consistently arriving at what those benchmarks would be, because we didn't have any. We were quite loose in the area of systemness in that. So we now have benchmarks in reading, and we're developing those in writing, and we're working in an AI tool which is helping us with our writing analysis. Our challenge as a system is about all learning together. So we're all at different phases of that learning and understanding, and there's a productive struggle for us, which is a really good struggle. We have great challenges and conversations, and when I think that we might be ready to proceed on something, I have to pull back and go, well, we're not ready to proceed because we don't have a shared understanding of why we're at the point we're at. Our system data wall is a good example of that. So we had a system data wall last year that was more static than what we wanted it to be. So this one is more dynamic, but we don't yet have full agreement of what should be on that data wall. And so now we've devolved it to, we've got a core set of data that's there, and then each school team working with a school will add to that according to what they want to work particularly around a school with. After our conversation with Lynn that we had a one-on-one with, we've encouraged our schools to give it a go and do the learning walks. They've been resistant in a space of COVID to do that. So we've just said, give it a go. It's the only way that you're going to know what is happening, that you can test that thinking and planning. So that's underway. Some schools are at the case management stage, which is exciting, and those schools will be meeting with Lynn tomorrow and the next day. So we seem to have got a little bit of momentum in probably the last 6 weeks, which is really exciting to see. That's probably our update, which is really good.
That's great. Just do it. I love it. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle and Leanne. So I'm going to go over to Wagga, and then I'm going to go to Tracy in North Coast region, and then to Vivian in Perth. So, and then that will end our session, although I do have a date for the next session I wanted to talk to you about. So we've only got about 10 minutes left. So over to Penny and Belinda. And I just say that Belinda and the senior team, system team, wrote an amazing document around targets and so on. And you might talk about that, Belinda.
The reading benchmark.
Yeah.
So we had some benchmarks in the head of our early years teachers, but we'd never had something written down that was specific. So we developed what those benchmarks should be. So we took the PM benchmark kit and then went to the Founderson-Pinnell benchmark kit too, so that we'd have that something that ran from K to 6 that we thought was effective. We trialled the Founderson-Pinnell kit, matched it up in lots of criteria with the PM benchmark kit to ensure that they were a really good fit. We took some NAPLAN data and looked at what average students were coming out on in NAPLAN and tested the Founderson-Pinnell kit with those students at the benchmarks we'd set, just to ensure that we were aiming at the correct level about what we wanted our students to be able to achieve. I felt, from being, I'm a reading recovery tutor, so I work in literacy, I just felt that a number wasn't enough, or a level wasn't enough, that especially with how many new teachers we have and the movement of teachers in schools, they really needed to know what it looked like. If you had a child on this level, what were you expecting to see? What would all of those things look like with students? So I went through the syllabus and marked out the things that you'd expect in the syllabus, and then went to the learning progressions and basically cut them up and matched them up, and then wrote some capabilities of what the students would look like in each area, so that it was really specific. Teachers could look and see, I've got a child on level 12, they are reaching benchmark, but are they actually able to do all of the things that they should be doing at level 12? So I've had a lot of really good feedback from teachers, particularly teachers who are new to a grade or new teachers. It just really maps out what effective teaching and effective student learning looks like.
It is absolutely outstanding. It's, I think it's the equivalent of a doctoral degree. I think that it could be a thesis for you. It is outstanding. There's a lot of research and thinking that goes into this. But, you know, it's for me, I'm always saying it's not about the level. It's just that that's where we know students are, but we really need to say, what does that mean, and what will it look like, and what will it take to get to the next level? So this is a document that's absolutely outstanding. So thank you.
And
would you
sorry.
share?
With my work, I note that children drop from year to year, and I think that is that teachers get them to a specific level, but they're not able to do everything that they need to do. So you have that drop over time. So, yeah.
Really help. Are you able to share the document?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it hasn't been sent to you, Lynn?
Well, I got it, but I just didn't. I didn't know whether I could share it with everybody.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. And I just need to talk to Penny about how to do that.
Well, I
No problem at all.
if you're okay to share it, I have the document. I could put it in the share. I'm thinking that no one out would use it for your own knowledge, but not distribute it widely. But it is just an excellent piece of work. Just excellent.
It took a very long time.
A very long time, a very long time. And I know that you vetted it many times before it was in the final form, but it's just excellent.
I might share another one with you, Lynn, just to make sure that it is the absolute final copy that you've got.
Okay. All right. I may not, but I've read it at least 3 times. I think it's very good. And it just informs me of the practice of expecting students to be at a level. What does that look like? So thank you. Thank you for that. Penny, do you have anything else to add about what you're doing in your work in WAGA?
Well, I know I've updated people on where we are with the Learning Collaborative, which is what we call our whole system work with Lynn, and we're really excited to have 3 webinars with our different cohorts next week with Lynn, where we'll be, the schools will be sharing their homework about where they are with case management and data walls. We'll also have a really exciting presentation from another one of our EOs, Beck Art, who's done a case study with 3 schools about a particular way to use data walls to measure particular growth points for students on MAI. So that's going to be really interesting. That's going to be in the 2nd session. But what I really want to talk about, and Belinda's part of this, being the outstanding literacy educator that she is that we're putting a proposal over the line for a major literacy initiative next year, the next few years, on writing in our schools, focusing particularly on the early years stage 1 and stage 4 writing. And what we're hoping to do is have instructional coaches in every school with particular strategies and focus. And the work with the Learning Collaborative will be really integral. The reading benchmarks and all of those things will come together because we've looked at our system data and we've gone, we can't ignore this data any longer. We've actually got to put our money on the line, and we've even taken the really difficult decisions of closing down a few programs that have been excellent programs, but perhaps have been, just diverted our focus and said on our system ARP, we've pretty much got literacy and this initiative. Numeracy, the numeracy initiative that we had already started, which was our targeting maths, and student wellbeing, and those are the 3 major ticket items. Everything's going to be funneled towards improving our student learning growth, because that's just such a big part of what we need to do.
Excellent, excellent. Oh, well, I'm looking forward to next week. Thank you. And I think I invited Tracy to say something about North Coast Region. Tracy?
Yes, thank you, Lynn. Our schools had started working with Lynn in February, and then we've been through that rapid change management period that we've all been through. So in that rapid change management period, we certainly gave everybody permission to reprioritise and focus on their well-being. And over the last few weeks, we've had some sessions where we've invited the network groups that we've had to come together and start to talk about the work that they've been doing, and we've engaged with that in those teams sessions as system leaders. So even though we said you've got permission to focus on your well-being, there were still opportunities provided around networking opportunities. It wasn't that it was ignored, it was just that we were really saying prioritise what needs to be prioritised through rapid change. What I've learned from that is everybody took the opportunity to continue to do the work. They're really, there's nobody who set anything aside. They've all maintained their focus and they've all continued to do the work. And in fact, they found opportunities in that rapid change management to do work that they didn't know they could have opportunities to do. My learning from it really is that the localised problem solving is so critical, that there's so many different ways to approach the work given the resources available to a school, the human resources, the structures, the levels of expertise and knowledge, that the localised problem solving that's occurred is a space for us to learn about what it looks like to implement this work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Tracy. And I'm always thinking about how schools and systems make this their work, their own work. So that localized problem solving is really big in terms, for me, in terms of thinking about embedding the work. You really
Right.
have that ownership locally to have people embed the work. So that's always something for all of us to be thinking about. So thanks, Tracy. And I'm going to move to, let me see, where's Vivian? Is she gone? No, there she is. Vivian, tell us how you're doing, how it's going. You have to unmute yourself. That's it. That's it.
Hello, everybody, and
Where are you?
thank you, Lynn.
Where are you?
I am in southwest of Western Australia. Pretty early rise for me this morning. It's a wet hair, but thank you for sending me the invite. I have been absolutely amazed by the information that I'm hearing this morning, and it's really got me thinking about some different approaches that we can put in place for where we are. We have a very, very scattered network of schools, and so my goal after listening to what's going on is to actually maybe make more networks within the network that I think will really help the schools share what they're doing. One thing I have found always is that the schools are very candid about what's going on, and I think that in itself is a real breakthrough. There's no competition. They're very happy to share and learn from each other, and I think that is just such a powerful aspect of the whole literacy collective that we're running. And yeah, I realise we're up against time, but thank you everybody for sharing. I've got lots of notes, and I'm going to send out a few emails as well.
Thank you.
Thank you to everybody.
And I don't know, Vivian, if you're part, in order to access the recording and some of the resources that we've said we'd share, you need to go to my website and then go to the members section. Have you done that? It's free, but you have to join.
Yes, I have. Yes,
okay.
I have. Thank you.
Gives me the opportunity to have a private space for us to learn. Now, I'm thinking that Andrea had to leave, so I know that we're nearing our time. In fact, we're over time. But I did want to just say thank you so much for today. I'm thinking about the next one, and I'm thinking that our next one could be October 26th. And I'm thinking about getting up early in the morning. So that's what Vivian is doing this morning. So I'm thinking about getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, my time, and meeting with you, which would be 8 o'clock at night, your time. And I know that many of our colleagues can't join us, or they have to go off to meetings. And I'm thinking, I'd just like to try 8 o'clock at night. What do people think about that? We would make it 8 till 9:30. Would that be okay? It would be a little better for Vivian. You okay with that? Okay, so it would be 6 o'clock my time. And I would like to invite one of my colleagues from Wales. I work across the nation of Wales, and I haven't asked her yet, but I would like her to present what they're doing in Wales. So this, to me, is a real breakthrough in my work because it's a whole country doing the work. I've got the whole state. I work in the whole state of Victoria and New South Wales and Queensland, but I haven't had the opportunity to work in a whole country. So I'm going to explore having one of my colleagues from Wales talk to us about the work across the country. Would that be of interest to you folks? Yeah, would be good. Okay, so I'd have someone present, and then we do the same around the group, sharing about what's new, what you're working on. And also, hopefully there'll be a bit of time to answer some questions if there's anything that you're worried about. We didn't quite get to that this time, but we will next time. So it's October 26th. And this time I'll try to send you out a Zoom invitation that's for Australian time, not for Canadian time. So, but it'll be 8 o'clock in your evening, October 26th. We're all good? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. I just love these sessions. It's really great to hear how you're moving the work forward and all differently. And I think the strong point is that you can collaborate with each other between the times. So I know that there have been some collaborations already. So thank you very much. Thanks, folks. We'll see you October 26th. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Write in the chat bar if you can make a final comment, that would be great. And then I'm going to send the recording to Todd, who will put it up on our site. And I'll put the chat bar up and Belinda's document as well. Thank you.